Hello everyone, welcome to Course for Education on Aminuwrites TV. In this discussion, we are going to look at the continuous assessment, principles and methods, continuous assessment. Now, Ghana's educational system has been characterized by end of term assessments. Now, in all levels of our educational system, we will see that we dwell so much on end of term assessment, that is terminal assessment. Now, one deficiency of end of term assessment is that it doesn't give you the true reflection of the child or the learner. Yes, you don't get the true reflection of the learner. You don't actually get the relevant information to help you in helping the child to develop. The only information you get in an end of term assessment is usually to know which child is very good at memorization or remembering of facts and figures. Then what then is the solution? So the solution is to have a continuous assessment. So no wonder in every educational reform, continuous assessment is given some attention, that we will have to implement it in our schools, that teachers are supposed to use continuous assessments. Now, that a visit to our schools shows that we don't actually do continuous assessment. We are still dwelling on end of term assessment for everything. Even at the national level, what do they use? What criteria do they use to move children from the junior high school to the senior high school or the technical and education division? It's end of term assessment. It's still an examination, one short exams. So you see, the situation is very difficult to change. But the truth is that if we really want to understand our learners, if we really want to help our learners help themselves, then continuous assessment should be the way forward. So in this discussion, we are going to take a look at the principles and methods of continuous assessments. So what then is continuous assessment? Continuous assessment is a systematic, yes, it's a systematic method of assessing student learning and monitoring the learner's progress. So it is a systematic method of assessing student learning and monitoring the learner's progress. Is this what we do in our schools? No. The school system doesn't allow teachers to assess learners and also to monitor learning. Our aim is simply to check whether students can recall things they have been told. And this is a deviation from continuous assessment. Now, a well-planned system of continuous assessment is an essential element of the school curriculum. So it must start from the beginning of the teaching and learning to the end of the teaching and learning. So, continuous assessments should actually begin the school year and should end at the end of the school year. So, as a teacher, you will have to assess your children continuously. It's not a one shot, and you will have to give them feedback so that they can use it for improving themselves and for future developments. Now, let's look at the process of continuous assessment. Now, the first thing in the process of continuous assessment is identification of new knowledge and skills to be learned. We first have to identify the new knowledge and skills we want to teach, or we want the children to know. So that's the first thing. What do you actually want the children to learn? What skill do you want them to acquire by the end of the term? You have to identify this, and you can see this from the national ideology, and this can be found in your curriculum. So you have to sit down, look at the curriculum to identify the specific. You know, the curriculum is so broad that it has been arranged into themes, into areas specific. So go into the curriculum and know the exact thing the curriculum framers or the education policy makers or the government of the day, yes, want you to teach. So these are the core things you should teach. These are the core knowledge you should impart, the core skills you should develop or teach. Now, the next stage in the continuous assessment process is to define, yes, is to define the types and instruments of assessment you are going to use. You will have to define what are some of the instruments you are going to use. There are several assessment instruments you can use. So, as a teacher, you will have to define which one will be suitable. Now, examination is not the only form of assessment. We know we have observation, we have interviewing, we have demonstration or application of the knowledge. So, examination is not the only assessment tool you should use as a teacher. The next stage is to define the acceptable level of mastery. As a teacher, as an educator, as a facilitator, beginning of the term, beginning of the year, you have to pen down the level you want your children to reach for you to define this level as an above average or an average performer. In fact, you have to define your mastery skill. You have to define which level should the child reach before you can say this child is qualified or this child has acquired the knowledge. So you have to define it. You have to be specific. Define the mastery level. The next stage of the continuous assessment preparation is to decide on the weighting to be given to each area of what assessment. You have to decide how many marks will be given to, let's say, when children demonstrate knowledge, when children apply knowledge, when children apply skills, when children are able to, or when they just show that they know. You have to define the weight. Maybe this will take these marks. This is going to take this. You have to do all these things. Yes. The next stage in the assessment process is to decide on the timing for your assessment. So will you do it every day, every week, fortnightly, every month. You as the facilitator, you have to define your time of assessment. The next stage is to design your assessment instrument for each learning or activity. So in every learning, in every activity, in every lesson, you have to design the assessment forms you will use. You have to decide on which forms of assessment you will be using. So you have to decide on your instruments. Now, the last stage of the assessment, the continuous assessment process, is to administer your assessment instruments at the appropriate time. So you administer your assessment instruments. Now, before we go on, let's take note that education is not an event. Education is a process. Education is not an event. It's a process. So if as a nation we want to improve upon our education, we first have to know that education is a process and not an event. Now, continuous assessment has been proven on several occasions to be far better than end of term assessment or one shot assessment. Now, let's look at the benefits of continuous assessment. The benefits of continuous assessment to the learner and to our education as a whole. Now, continuous assessment is systematic. So because it's systematic, it is planned and it is implemented according to an appropriate time frame for a variety of activities. So it is not an ad hoc situation where you get up and write, we are doing end of term exam, we are doing quiz. No, it is planned. So because it's planned, you know which area to attack in every assessment session. The next advantage is it is comprehensive. It is comprehensive. Now, it is comprehensive in the sense that it covers all aspects of the child's learning. So it's practical, it's creative, it's manipulative, it is productive, and attitudinal. So continuous assessment is comprehensive. End of term assessment or one shot examination or assessment looks at only one side of learning. But continuous assessment look at all these aspects. So we say it is comprehensive. The next characteristics or advantage of a continuous assessment is that it is cumulative. Yes, it is what? Cumulative. So you see that the learner's assessment or learner's learning is assessed and measured cumulatively over a period. So we don't use one day event to judge a learner. No, we look at all as past assessments from one stage to the other so that we can make a value judgment on the learner. The next advantage or characteristics of continuous assessment is that it is guidance oriented. Now, since this form of assessment is in a continuous form, it helps you, the teacher, to guide the learner. It helps you to help the learner place himself where his strength is actually is. So it will help the learner to guide himself in making choices in life. So it is guidance oriented. The last importance or characteristics of continuous assessment is that it is formative. It is formative. So it is formative in the sense that it is development oriented, and it is a continuous process. While the learning is going on, the assessment is also going on in that form. It is not done at the end, but it is done at the beginning and whilst it is ongoing. So these are some of the processes, methods, and principles of continuous assessment. As usual, you can send all your questions through WhatsApp through 0244 299 706, 0244 299 706. Thank you.